I'm not going to think about him. I'm not going to think about him at all. I'm not going to think about him. I'm not going to think about his hair. I'm not going to think about how I always hated his dad. I'm not going to think how I envied his dog. I'm not going to think about the time he yelled at me in 6th grade all the way across the hall just to say hi. I'm not going to think about the first time we held hands was at his church. I'm not going to think about the way he misspelled my name on the science project 6 times. I'm not going to think about the watercolor painting of the tree I have in my bedroom. I'm not going to think about all the times he ran into me during swimming. I'm not going to think about how we were always partners in open wall in 6th grade English. I'm not going to think about how he cut off my circulation in my hand on the Ferris wheel because he was always afraid of heights and he held it way too tight. I'm not going to think about the time he slammed a door on my wrist at the 4-H fair and never really apologized but gave me excuses instead. I'm not going to think about how he tried to break dance at the 6th grade school dance and hurt his head. I'm not going to think about how I always gave him a cookie for lunch in 6th and 7th grade. I'm not going to think about how he once told me childbirth actually sounds painful. I'm not going to think about the time he accidentally walked into the girls' restroom at school. I'm not going to think about the time he was absent from school because he threw up on his bus. I'm not going to think about the reason I couldn't wear a ponytail around him was because he would always pull it. I'm not going to think about how he once pushed me into a pool while I was putting on my goggles. I'm not going to think about all the emails he sent me. I'm not going to think about the time when I dived deep into the pool and he yelled, "Don't suffocate." I'm not going to think about the time we sat alone together at the field trip at Burger King and he always considered it a date. And I'm not going to think about the first time he hugged me was because I let him borrow my Nintendo 64.